Hey guys, this is John from Sonic Drive Studio. Thank you so much for checking out this video about the new Line 6 Helix firmware 2.20. Line 6 has done a fantastic job with this update, and there are all sorts of new goodies available in the Helix right now if you update to 2.20. There were a couple of things added, like the new Line 6 Badonk Amp, which is based on the big bottom amp model, and some bass amps as well as some bass drives and some other effects. With the old Line 6 hardware, like the Pod X3 Live, the Line 6 Feta, and Pod Farm, I was always a big fan of the big bottom amp model, which was a Line 6 original amp. That amp model is actually quite well known because it was used by bands like Meshuggah and all sorts of heavy metal bands, because it has a really tight and huge crunch to it, and of course, huge bottom end. It's a Line 6 original amp, but as far as I know, it was based on a cross between a Mesa Boogie rectifier and a Rivera amp. I really dig how this sounds in the new Helix firmware, and I highly recommend checking it out. The high end is really natural, the mid-range is great, and the low end, of course, is huge, but only if you need it to be. You can dial out the bigness very easily. So that's why I chose this amp for the rhythm tones in that song you just heard. For the record, I'm using passive pickups in my Schecter SLS-C1P to give it that bright, gnarly presence on the rhythm guitars. Okay, so let's start off the chain. I'm using the input noise gate, of course, and I have the threshold set to minus 76 dB. And as always, I have the decay set to 10 milliseconds. Then, of course, the Line 6 Badonk Amp, gain set to 5, bass set to 4.9. Obviously, be very careful with this control. Mid set to 5.4, treble set to 6.1, and the presence set to 5.3. The master is set to the default setting, which is 5, and I lowered the depth from the default value a little bit, and I set it to 1.7. I also raised the sag a little bit. Now this amp is sounding great, like I said, and I think it's a huge update from the older amp model, so really try this out, especially for heavy tones. Then for the impulse response block, of course I'm using the high resolution IR, and as usual I'm using an Ownhammer IR, which is the 4x12 Recto V70B cab, and I'm using the Ownhammer 1 file from the Quick Start folder, as I usually do. Now I think that this cab is just a perfect pairing with this amp. It just sounds really balanced and great, and it sounds really analog. For those of you who don't know, you can buy this cabinet on ownhammer.com. It's available in the Core Tone Bundle, which has 4 different cabinets in it, and the Recto V70 is included. And if you don't like the bundle, you can also go to the 4x12 Recto page and choose the single V70 speaker expansion. But of course, all of these speaker options sound great in their own right. In the impulse response block, I have the low cut set to 91 Hz, just to deal with the overwhelming low end from this amp. And then, as I always do with the Helix for rhythm tones, I have a subtle reverb going on. Set to room, the decay is set to 4, and the mix is set to 25%. Other than that, I didn't change the default settings. Of course, this new Helix update has a lot of bass goodies, so I had to make a cool bass tone for this song. There's a new drive pedal for bass in the Helix, which was a very welcome addition, in my opinion, and it's the Obsidian 7000. As far as I know, this one is based on the Dark Class B7K bass drive pedal. I'll walk you through the settings real quickly. I have the drive set to 6.1, level set to 5, blend set to 8.2, just to leave a little bit of that natural bass sound in there. Grunt set to boost, attack set to flat. If you set this to boost, you'll notice that the drive increases, and I found that for this tone, flat was the best setting. Master is set to 5.6, bass is set to 5.5, the low frequency setting is set to 250 Hz, and I've lowered that to minus 8 dB. When you're doing metal, your bass won't need a lot of that frequency area. The high mid frequency is set to 750 Hz, and I've boosted that to about 4.5 dBs, and the treble is set to 7.4 dBs. And of course, the distortion is set to on. As far as the amp goes, I'm using the Tuck and Go bass amp model, which sounds great. Bass is set to 6.7, the low mids are set to 5.4, treble is turned up to 9.4, just to get the bass to cut through the mix a bit with all the heavy guitars and heavy drums. The high mids are set to 8.8 and the channel volume is set to 6.7. Other than that, I didn't change anything here. And of course, in the impulse response block, I'm using another Ownhammer IR from the Ownhammer bass pack. In this case, I'm using the 4x10 Ampeg SVT10 cut ribbon file. I'd have to say that these bass IRs are really the best I've ever tried. They are very easy to use and they don't require a lot of tweaking. For the Helix, I recommend trying out the cut IRs because they sit in the mix just perfectly. That's it for now. I really hope you enjoyed this video and this song. Congratulations to Line 6 for making such an awesome firmware for the Helix again. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe and follow us on facebook.com/sonicdrivestudio. Thanks.